Hey everybody, it's Steve, and in this video I want to go over a new river module that we're working on building for our modular N-scale layout. So we wanted to build a module that was basically the size of one of the Kato double track bridges, so it would basically fit in between two of the regular module sections and be exactly the same length as the bridge. So essentially what I did was I started out by attaching the bridges to two adjoining modules and use that as a reference for measuring some stock wood that I picked up from Home Depot. This is basically just 3" by 1/4" poplar that I'm using for the frame of the little module section. So I basically use the bridge and the space in between the two modules as a guide for sizing up the width of the module, and then I simply also use the length of the module to cut the longer or the long side sections of those modules. So it was a pretty straightforward process. I just used a simple miter box and handsaw to cut the 4 modules. Now I did have to notch out using a chisel and a hammer some little areas for the bridges themselves, since the bottom of the bridges does extend a little bit below the sides of the module section that I'm building for the river. So I cut little notches in there using a chisel. You could also saw them out with a small handsaw or a coping saw, and I actually did that for some sections. But essentially, you know, that kind of just depends on the bridge if you need to do that or not, or you can make the whole sides just a little bit shorter in general, and that would work fine too. Now for the ends, I try to carve out, again with a hammer and chisel, an area to basically be more or less even with where I want to have the river level on the front and back section. So that was just you know, I had some issues with that. So you can see here that the first few times that I tried to go around there, I did cause some splitting, and so I had to go back and glue some pieces back together to recreate the end, and then I kind of braced them with some little wood blocks on the backhand side, and everything to keep everything in place. Now the other side, I went through and just used a coping saw, and so that worked out a lot better. I didn't have any problems with the wood splitting. Again, it's only a 1/4" thick, and so it's very easy to split that. Now, once I had everything cut to size, I basically went through it and assembled the 4 sections, and I used some corner clamps, which are really handy, so you can basically clamp everything into a perfect 90-degree angle using those. And so I basically took the 4 sides that I had cut, glued them together, used some tape as well to help hold some of the sections in alignment, and then again using the 4 corner clamps, I was able to get everything pretty much you know, square and how I needed it to be lined up correctly and fit pretty good. Once that was dry, you can see here everything was for the most part just an open empty box. Again, I used some little wood blocks in the corners to help brace them, since it was fairly thin wood. Now I cut a few strips of wood to place on the bottom of the module, just 4 of those, 1 on each side, 2 in the middle, to kind of help support the module. You know, but the main thing though was I cut a piece of 1" thick sheet foam, and that really provides most of the rigidity for the module. So I glued that just using regular wood glue, and then I also cut a couple strips for each side, which will kind of eventually be the river embankments. And so those were also again cut and then glued in place, and so pretty much I had everything you know, ready to go in terms of basic structure. I did use a knife to kind of do some rough shaping of the size, and I used my Surfoam tool, my Stanley Surfoam tool, to shave things down to get a rough approximation of how I wanted things to fit. Used a hot glue gun on these pieces so it would set immediately, and I wouldn't have to worry about waiting for glue to dry and having to clamp things. And so once I got that in place, I kind of trimmed the edges a little bit with a small knife, and then went back to work with the Surfoam tool, kind of blend everything together and to carve out the bottom portion of the riverbed to roughly the shape that I wanted. Pretty quick work with the Surfoam tool, but once I had everything carved out, I used some lightweight spackle to fill in all the gaps and kind of smooth things out, and basically just create a nice smooth surface, so when it's time to go and paint and actually scenic everything, that we'll have a nice base to work with. So again, a pretty quick process. Just put everything on there, got everything smoothed out, and once that was put on there, you can kind of see what everything looked like here. Just a nice river valley shape there. And then once all of that was done, simply a matter of taking a sanding block and going through and smoothing everything out. Again, being the lightweight spackle, it does sand very quickly and easily, and so that was a pretty quick process. getting everything sanded as well as the wood itself, and so everything will be ready to paint and stain. So you can see this is a very lightweight module. The whole thing weighs less than 2 pounds, and so again, with the foam and the poplar, it's super lightweight, and that will really make it easy to transport to and from train shows, and just moving it around from setting up in the house and putting it back in storage and that kind of thing. So in the next segment of this video series, we'll go through painting it, adding the various scenery materials, the ground foam, the trees, everything else, and then pouring in a resin river using the two-part Envirotex epoxy, which I'll be using for the actual water itself. And we'll go through the process of applying all that and finishing up the river module, and then we'll see how all that looks on the layout. So thanks for watching. Bye.